Hello, wherever you are joining us from today, we want to say a huge welcome to our global community. We hope that you're enjoying the Customer Marketing Summit. I also want to send out an extra special thank you to all our sponsors, partners, and participants who together have made this event possible. We are also delighted to welcome CrowdVocate as our headline sponsor today. Their sessions are bursting with insights to help you level up. But remember, the learning doesn't stop here. If you haven't already, you can upgrade your pass to include access to all today's sessions on demand with our Access All Areas pass. Or you can become a PMA Pro member and benefit from unlimited access to exclusive templates, frameworks, and our entire library of videos and slide decks from our events. And remember, have your questions at the ready. Simply post your question in the comments section and get awesome advice from an expert in the field. What's not to love about that? So now, on to the next talk. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Customer Marketing Summit. We have another fantastic live session for you now. I am joined by the wonderful Neil McLean, who's co-founder at Novatic, for his session. And yeah, just before we let Neil take it away, just want to remind everybody that we are going to be running a brief live Q&A after the session. So any questions, opinions, points you want clarified, pop them in the chat and I'll catch up with Neil in 20 minutes or so. So welcome, Neil, over to you.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here today and to share more about what we found. So for context, I'm Neil McLean, one of the co-founders here at Novatic. And at Novatic, we help sales and marketing teams create interactive product demos without engineering. So one of the common use cases that we see is creating interactive product tours. So we'll cover that in a bit, but the conversation that we're focusing on today is looking at how do early customers interact with your product? And the lens in which we viewed this is by studying around 5,600 B2B SaaS CTAs and looking at what is the way in which early customers are getting into the product, how are they experiencing it, and what does that motion look like? And we're going to contextualize this by looking at a few things. So number one is, what does that CTA look like and what are some trends that we've seen in our analysis of the industry broadly? We'll also look at a few different categories specifically. So we'll first examine the product trial, the sales-led demo, the tried and true one, and then also looking at this new emerging combination, which is the product tour. We'll then go into some Q&A after. But one of the ways in which we wanted to view this is by building the right prospect experience. Because one of the things that we have been realizing as we've been embarking on our journey at Novatic and broadly as we've talked to marketers in the space is that building the right end-to-end customer journey is extremely important. And as we know, it doesn't just start when they visit your website. They hear about you through G2, they talk to friends in Slack channels, maybe a friend talking about your software directly. But a lot of the buying process happens previous to them visiting the website. So when they're on the website, it's really important that you provide that next level experience, considering the level of research that's been done before. So the way in which you can engage buyers is really critical, especially because that website is becoming the most important conversion mechanism you have in the entirety of the funnel. So today we'll look at how different teams across different verticals of software are engaging those prospective buyers and how they're accommodating different call to actions to reflect that, and the language behind that is something that we'll explore today. And as you'll see here, there's a bunch of different ways that folks have accommodated that call to action, and we'll first start by looking at a tried and true go-to-market model, which is the trial. Many of you have seen the growth of the product-led growth movement these last few months, and it has taken the market by storm because it's super impactful in many ways. And what we did first is in our analysis of these 5,600 B2B SaaS CTAs is we looked at what are some common keywords and themes and how often are those used. So a little bit of context into our methodology is we've looked at in all of these sites, looked at what does that call to action look like, and we grouped them according to different categories of software and how they relate to their peers. For the free trial specifically, what you're seeing here is a word cloud where the size of the text corresponds to the frequency in which they've been raised. So you'll see that free trial is by far and away the most common way to indicate the trial is available on the website. Start free trial and permutations that are also available. But one of the other interesting findings that we had is that actually it's really common for folks not only to offer that trial, but to have it be requested. So if you go to a website and click trial, oftentimes it may say free trial or start free trial, but you're actually chatting with someone on sales or customer success before getting into the product. There's oftentimes this push-pull between what vendors really enjoy and what prospects really want. And this is oftentimes viewed as a hybrid approach or happy medium of sorts, because prospects can get hands-on with the product, they can experience it, loop in other members for the evaluation. But at the end of the day, this sales team or the customer success team can experience their use case, can do full discovery, and get a better read on the opportunity. So that hybrid request trial model is something that we've seen a lot of companies adopt, especially those in the B2B SaaS space. So the next thing we wanted to look at is, where do product trials succeed and where do they fall short? And what you notice on that category for the left is that there's certain areas of software where a trial really makes sense. And the common theme across those top left 3 bullets is that if you have a category of software that's known in the market, a trial is a really compelling offering. And the reason is, for a project management tool, people already know what they're signing up for. There's a lot of clarity into the value proposition that project management tools have. So if you're at ClickUp or Monday.com, having people experience the product right away makes total sense. And adjacent to that is just the quick time to value. So if users can go into your product and see the value that you're offering in 15, 20 minutes, maybe even less, that's really compelling. So you can get people into the product right away. You can have usage, perhaps usage-based pricing to either tie that to value. And there's a lot of great leverage you can pull if the product can easily be experienced. And related to that is there's not much not much hand holding needed for that specific product. Now, there's areas where trials fail too, and this is related to a lot of the education that needs to be done, often through a sales-led model. So if someone's experiencing the product right away, and they don't really understand what the value proposition is, they don't really understand how this can apply to their use case, that's oftentimes pretty challenging. And this often happens in niche markets that are oftentimes emerging. Another area where trials fails is top-down sales. So if you're selling to the CIO, the CRO, it's really hard to convince them to spend 14 days in your product. So getting a way for them to experience the product in a different way, that makes sense there. And lastly, if there's barriers to entry into your tool or service, a trial probably wouldn't make sense. So think about a supply chain management tool with integrations. If it takes a month to set up the product, it probably doesn't make sense to have users go through that pain just to see how it works. So there's different areas and considerations that we've seen from the market as far as where trials win and where they fall short. So the next question we had is not only where do they win, where do they fall short, but what duration and what sort of categories are offered for trials. And what you see here is a chart of the different categories of software where trials are prevalent. So you'll see specifically project management tools, e-commerce tools, email marketing tools are all areas where trials make a lot of sense. And the common theme among a bunch of these, while not entirely true, is that a lot of these have quick time to value. So let's just pick email marketing, for example. If you are running an email marketing company, let's just say like a MailJet, you can have users sign up for your platform. They can import their list of contacts and send a personalized email in perhaps 20, 30 minutes. So it makes total sense. You want people to have that experience and try it out. The same goes for content management systems like a Box or Dropbox, or project management tools like a Monday.com, ClickUp, etc. These tools have a lot of similarities in the sense they have very low time to see that value. And for a lot of these products, it can often be a very frictionless process to see the value there. So the next question that we asked is, in addition to what verticals of software tend to get trials, what duration of time is typical for these trials? And we looked at 14 days, 30 days, and 7 days. And we found is by far 14 days was the most common. So you'll look at this graph down here, and around 72% of the companies we looked at had 14-day trials on the website. as it was advertised. Around 16% did 30 days and around 12% did 7 days. And we talked to customers that had these different ranges of trials, and we tried to figure out, what is driving a 7-day versus 14-day trial? Why did you make that decision? And one of the things that we learned is that a lot of companies start by offering a quick trial period, perhaps it's 7 days. But what inevitably happens is that 5 business days to evaluate software, which in many cases, larger ACVs, there's a lot of evaluation there, isn't necessarily not right enough time. So the other people have to be looped into the evaluation, and it inevitably gets extended to a longer period of time. But a 14-day mix, just like the request trial model, is a nice mix between what's vendor friendly and what's prospect friendly. So people can have 10 business days to experience the product. They can loop in other members to the evaluation, but it's not an overbearing amount of time for the sales teams. That's what we found around time-based trials. What I next wanted to go through is the demo. So this is the tried and true model for a lot of sales, and this was the main way that people went through the sales motion for most products. So one of the things that we'll look at here is, let me just go back here, there we go, is the common language or terminology that's used for showcasing the demo. And as you'll see here, as indicated by the size of the text, request a demo is by far and away the most common way to indicate that's the next step in the sales funnel. Schedule a demo and get a demo are close seconds and thirds. But what we'll see here is something that we've experienced when doing our research, is that oftentimes a demo doesn't actually correspond to that demo in the first call. And what we've seen is a lot of teams switch their demo-based CTA, something that's actually reflective of the sales process. What often happens is people request a demo and they go into the first call expecting to see the product, see how it works. And what ends up happening is that they talk to a 22-year-old SDR that's just asking them questions and they're not seeing any value from that conversation. So while some companies have adjusted their CTAs, that may make sense in your circumstance to avoid challenging that prospect relationship. So we've seen companies switch from request a demo or schedule a demo to talk to sales, get in touch, contact us, because if that's what's actually happening in the sales funnel, it's important to set that expectation up front to avoid frustrating the prospect experience. So what we'll next do is look at where demos win and where demos fail in the broader spectrum. So where they win is if you have a sale or product that's built on direct relationships with longer deal cycles, it may make a lot of sense to do a demo. These are oftentimes enterprise level deals, higher ACVs, in the hundreds of thousands. But you can also do this for smaller ACVs as well. It's not preclusive, of course. But where relationships matter and education matters is another really important element. So if your tool is in that niche or emerging industry where you need to describe and provide more context on the value that your product provides, it totally makes sense that a demo and that human connection be really important. And also tailoring would also be something that's helpful. So if you wanted to showcase a very configurable or a product that you really want to understand at a deep level and show that to a prospective customer in a very desired state, having a demo allows you that ownership over the entire process, which makes total sense in this circumstance. But as we know from product-led growth, when you have humans in the funnel, it also means that customer acquisition cost is high. And sales teams spend a lot of cycles on prospects who just want to see the product and how it works. So that just browsing crowd can take a lot of valuable time from your sales teams when a lot of folks just want to see how the product works. So that is a definite downside there. The other ones that we've seen is bottoms up selling becomes a really big challenge, especially when you have these startups that you're working with that don't necessarily have a high ACV or a high willingness to pay. And the other area that we've seen is if you lack user engagement. So in the trial or product tour, people are actively experiencing the product. They're clicking around, they're seeing how it works in a way that's deeply tangible. If it's a demo, it's a sit back experience. You're seeing how things are going, and you may have some degree of engagement, but it's far less stimulating than if you're actually in the product. So what we looked at next is, what category of companies tend to lead with demos in the sales-led model. And it's no surprise that a lot of the categories of software you see here are those with high barrier to entry in terms of setup. So you look at a compliance tool, you look at a supply chain tool or ERP or MarTech tool. Oftentimes they have higher barrier to entry. So it's not as easy to set the user up on a quick 7-day trial if they have to do a deep integration. So those sorts of companies tend to lead with a sales-led model. Now, there are others in the space, of course, like legal tech, ed tech, and others that have very similar approaches. So what we wanted to look at next is there a way that you can merge the two approaches? So if you had a trial on your website, did you also have a demo or talk to sales option on your website? So we come back through our analysis and found that if you had a trial on your website, around 63% of those companies that have a trial also had a demo option. And this, when looking at it more, this takes total sense. It essentially allows prospects to go in their own swim lanes. If a startup that wants to come into your product and play around, they can totally do that by signing up for a trial. But if you have an enterprise customer that wants to loop in other people in their evaluation, that wants to talk through role-based access, SSO, and those typical enterprise security concerns, that is something that can be handled through a talk to sales call to action. So allowing that hybrid approach is something we've seen a lot of companies take to accommodate product-led growth, while also allowing those buyers that want that human-oriented approach to do so. We've also seen around 36%, of the folks just have a purely trial option. And those tend to lean towards very simple, easy to teach products. So what we did is we put together the CTA range, and we'll provide this as well, but it's really helpful for folks to be able to see what are my peers doing. So if you're in the project management space, what is the common call to action and what is that for ed tech, legal tech? And so you'll see on this spectrum where it is commonly found for folks to land based on the vertical of software that they're currently in. And it goes all back to those few points we discussed before: barriers to entry to usage, and what is the go-to-market motion for a lot of these folks. Is it something they can instantly sign up for, or is there a little more challenge to seeing value? Okay, so with that, I wanted to talk through an emerging early product touchpoint. And this is an interactive product tour. So this combines a lot of the benefits of that trial model, while also incorporating some of the challenges with the demo-led model. So if you have a sales or demo-led model, you have to have humans in the funnel to show the product. But at the same time, you don't necessarily want to support them with you if you offer a trial. So a product tour is actually a really compelling alternative. So folks can get into the product, they can click around, they can see how it works, but they're not signing up for a full trial. They don't need a full 14-day evaluation period just to see how the software works. And this is especially compelling for folks with a sales-led go-to-market motion, because people can't see the product until maybe 1 to 2 calls if they're lucky. So this allows folks to get right into the product without having to do a lot of setup or integrations just to see how it works. So related to this, you can see where product tours win and where product tours fail. And there's a few considerations that we have for making product tours a success. So one is, if generic data works for you and your company, a product tour could work really well. You want to show something that's generalizable. And of course, you can personalize it with different workflows, persona-based, whether it's feature-based. You can really have the depth of those workflows available. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure the data can speak to them, and it doesn't require specific data entry on their end. We also wanted to share that for prospects that have hands-on experiences as an important part of the evaluation process is an area where product tours make a lot of sense. So of course, there's going to be prospects that always want to get hands-on. And I would actually argue that in today's buying process, getting hands-on in the sales process is becoming a requisite. I would say 10 years ago, most buyers didn't expect that. But we've seen a seismic shift in the consumerization of enterprise software specifically, so that if you are buying software today, you expect to see how it works. You expect to click around. You expect to go into the product before you sign that $20K annual contract. So getting people hands-on is something that we've seen, especially in the B2B world. these last few years. The other area where product tours are a success is if setup or training is needed to see product value. So if your product has deep integrations, it requires a lot of hand-holding to get started, it may make sense to have a product tour that's guided end to end so you can show that specific functionality that you want that gets people excited, while also allowing them to experience it in a very locked down way. So they're not setting up a trial. They don't have to go through the extensive integration periods. They're just looking at how the software works. At the same time, there are areas where product tours may not make sense. So if your product is in a limited scope, if there isn't much value being able to be shown, and some examples include like identity management solutions, like an Okta or Auth0, it doesn't necessarily make sense to have a product tour if most of the product is behind the scenes. And lastly, if products are able to instantly show value, a product tour might not also make sense. So where this comes in handy is Gmail. If you can sign up for the product in 3 minutes, you can send your email to your friend, you probably don't need a product tour to show how that works. So those are some different considerations that we've seen folks take as they've approached this new emerging go-to-market model. And so one of the things that we'll look at is Met My Customers. They're one of Novatic's customers today. And one of the things that they did is they kept the call to action on their landing page consistent. So you notice right now it's try it free. And what they did is they swapped out the trial for an interactive product tour. There's other areas in the page that went to trial. But for this one specifically, they swapped it out and they saw a few interesting things when the product tour was implemented. So number one is they saw more enterprise customers come through. And after conversations with them, it became clear that if you're an enterprise company, spending 4 to 5 hours setting up a CRM is not something that you're willing to do. And there's concerns around confidentiality of data. So they've seen a lot of enterprise leads come into the funnel because it's easy to experience the product without having to set up the full trial. Secondly, the other benefit they saw is that sales cycles are shorter. So when people can experience the product before chatting with sales, the end-to-end cycle is a lot shorter because that first call can be use case oriented rather than the harbor tour. Here's how it works. So allowing people to experience the product is the downstream effect of shortening that sales cycle end to end based on our conversations and some metrics that we gathered from them. Now, there's definitely industries where product tours make sense. There's definitely industries where trials and demos make sense. So there's, of course, some individual considerations to be made. But we hope this analysis is helpful to provide some high-level context on how companies are approaching early prospect experiences when different go-to-market motions make sense for you. So with that, I wanted to share a quick offer that we're putting together for the Product Marketing Alliance community. You go to novatic.com/PMA offer, and we'll actually build out an interactive demo for you. So if you wanted to explore what that interactive demo or product tour looks like on your website, we're happy to do that. Feel free to go ahead and submit the form on that landing page, and we'll get you set up. But at this point, thank you guys so much for taking the time to go through this presentation with me today. We'd love to open the floor for any questions that folks have.
Absolutely. Thanks, Neil. That was a super informative session. We've got a couple of questions here that I'm just going to run through. So yeah, can you share a few best practices for A/B testing the use of demos?
Yeah, that's a great one. So one of the things that could be helpful is selectively including call to actions at different points in the page. So we've seen some customers, rather than swapping out every CTA all at once to a different one, maybe it's try product or maybe it's demo, swapping out specific ones and on a use case page. So we've seen customers that target perhaps more senior leaders say, hey, on this persona that's the executive page, we're just going to swap out that to the demo option. And for folks that are on the startup page, swap out that to the trial option. So I would say more targeted approaches towards experimentation has yielded results for some users so far.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And how would you approach product tours when your buyer persona and user personas are different?
That's interesting, yeah. So if your buyer persona and user personas are separate, I think it'd be important to include in the product tour optionality for both. So we've seen folks and can go into more detail, but there is oftentimes a way to include different routes or adventures that a user could go on. So maybe you go into the persona route that's the end user for an HR tool, so they can see what it looks like to develop a performance plan. But then you could also have another tour that walks to the admin level of, hey, how do you manage all these 50 users in the platform, and how do you do things like access? So incorporating different workflows would be a good approach to that, but I think it is a really good consideration to have here.
Definitely, I guess it's just about identifying who those key stakeholders are as well, and kind of working backwards.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So yeah, I guess, is there any final call for questions? I'm keeping my eyes peeled on the chat. But yeah, I know you shared that offer with us, which is fantastic. But yeah, if people wanted to kind of connect with you further or find out more, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, no, thanks, Rose. So that PMA offer is an awesome one for taking the next step. I'm also available on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with me, shoot me a message, and we'd love to connect here. Excited to keep learning from this community.
Amazing. Well, yeah, if there's any last minute questions that you might have missed out, feel free to connect with Neil directly. And we do have a couple more awesome sessions lined up for you right now. So we are diving right into a fireside chat with the legend that is Bree Bunzel from Dropbox. So stay tuned, and thanks again, Neil.
Thank you.